Hey guys, hope all of you are well, and in this video we are going to discuss some polity questions. We are not discussing the answers, we are just discussing what is the nature of those polity questions. What are the purposes of those questions, means what the examiner wants from you. These questions are from the previous year's questions papers from GS2 from the polity sections. So let's begin. If we say about the nature of the questions, then 80% of the questions are mostly related with the dynamic part. That means they are from current affairs questions. Right, so the nature of the questions, to say in one word, they are very dynamic. And the purpose of the questions are to examine in-depth analysis of the applied change of polity. That means you must have to acquire a applied change of polity. That means how you are using the theoretical part from the books in the practical sense. It means your capability to use the theoretical part in practical sense with applied sense of polity. This is very much important, and these are some purposes of the questions asked in exam. Your dynamic sense to examine the situation under contemporary political perspectives with basic sense of polity. Here you need to require a good analytical power. How with a good analytical power and under the current socio-political perspectives you are analyzing the contemporary issue, right? So these are some basic purposes of the questions which the examiner wants from you. We will examine them in detail with reference to the questions asked in the exam. To take a question, one question, recent amendments to the Right to Information Act will have profound impact on the autonomy and independence of the Information Commission discussed. That means recent amendments to the Right to Information Act. The recent amendment to the occurred to the Right to Information Act will have profound impact on the autonomy and independence of the Information Commission discussed. If we break up the question, then there are two parts in the question. One is static and another is dynamic. Means one is theoretical part and another is applied part. And what is the theoretical part? That you must have knowledge what are the autonomy and independence of Information Commission. Right, and what are the dynamic part? What are the recent amendments and how it will impact the autonomy and independence of Information Commission. Right, so the link between static and dynamic part, the interface created by this theory and practical part is the required demand of the question. In polity questions, you will see that you always needed to break the question into two parts, theory and practical. And the link interface given by these two is the required demand of the question. Here, what is the required demand of the question? That how the recent amendments to the Information Act will impact the autonomy and independence of Information Commission. Here, this interface is the required demand of the question. And in this dynamic part, in this interface, which is the demand of the question, you have to apply your basic sense of your polity with your dynamic knowledge, means the knowledge of your current affairs. Here you have to connect both the static and current affairs questions. Instead of doing this, if you only write in the questions, I have seen many students that who do not break the questions, which do not read the questions. Instead, what did they do? They hear the word Information Commission, autonomy and independence of Information Commission, and they directly go to write in the answers about the powers of the Information Commission. But sufficient is to say that the question is not asking only about the power of Information Commission. The question is asking how the recent amendments of the Information Act will impact on the autonomy and independence of the Information Commission. So once you break up the questions into these two parts, the created interface between this static and dynamic part will be your required answer. Here you have to analyze the current affairs under the guidance of the static or vice versa. Again, take another question. How far do you think cooperation, competition, and confrontation have shaped the nature of federation in India? Cite some recent examples to validate your answer. How far do you think cooperation, competition, and confrontation have shaped the nature of federation in India? This question is related to Indian federalism and some factors which have contributed to the federation of India, and that factors need to be analyzed under the perspective of current affairs, that how those factors which contributed in the past have been able to assimilate with the present situation. This is the demand of the question, and if we break the question as I have said too, there are two parts. One is static or theory and another is dynamic or practical. What is the static part of the question? The static part of the question is derivation of nature of Indian federalism from British laws or freedom struggle. That means how the federalism, the federation of Indian constitution, the federalistic character of Indian constitution have derived its nature from the British laws or freedom struggle. Means how, to what extent Indian constitution has derived its some nature of some nature of federalism from the pre-independence era. But this, you need not to analyze all the natures of Indian federalism derived from ancient India, derived from pre-independence era. There is a guidance that cooperation, competition, and confrontation. That's how these three terms, especially cooperation, competition, and confrontation, how the Federation of India derived its nature under these three terms from pre-independence era. This is the static nature of the question. The another is the dynamic or practical. What is the dynamic part? That how current situations have been solved or boosted to the federalism of India under these three terms. Well, these three terms, competition, confrontation, and cooperation, these are the some natures of Indian federalism which have already been enlisted in Indian constitution with the help of taking the sources from the pre-independence era. Well, this is good. But how these three terms of Indian federalism have been able to help at the present situations to solve some political problems? This is the required demand of the question. Means you have to link the current and you have to link the static and current part. Right, and the necessary interface, the created interface you will find by linking the static and dynamic part will be the required demand of your answer. I have seen many students what they have done, that they have written mostly about the nature of Indian Federation. The question is not asking about the nature of Indian Federation. Right, here the demand, you have to emphasize mostly on the current affairs part. Yes, you have to touch the static part. You must have to touch the static part. And you must have also knowledge of this static part. Without the knowledge of static portion, you cannot solve the dynamic part. But the required demand of the question is not to write the features about the Indian federalism. Right, the required demand of the question is to link the static and dynamic part. Right, so here in this interface you have to apply your analytical power with basic sense of polity under the current political perspectives. Let's take another question. Question is, there is a need for simplification of procedure for disqualification of persons found guilty of corrupt practices under RPA Act. Comment. The question is, there is a need for simplification of procedure for disqualification of persons found guilty of corrupt practices under RPA Act. Comment. But the first mistake student here is that they presume that they know about RPA Act. The second mistake again they do is that the disqualification on the ground of corrupt practices, which they again think that they know about this also. So these are the two crucial mistakes students at first hand make because they do not consider the other factors. At first hand, they think that they knew about these terms, so they mainly begin to write about these two terms, which is not the required demand of the question. So as we have already discussed, what we need to see is what is the dynamic part here. The dynamic part here is the simplification of procedure in the RPA Act. The interface between this dynamic and the static part is that which requires how a convicted person under this RPA Act on the relevant grounds can be given punishment without any procedural or institutional delay. This is the required demand of the interface of this question. And the hidden term here required by this interface is the model code of conduct, which has nowhere been mentioned in the question. But this is this is one of the crucial hidden term required by the interface of the question, which we find from after connecting the static and dynamic part. So hidden term here is the model code of conduct, which is nowhere been mentioned. So what you have to mainly discuss here is that whether a statutory status can be given to this model code of conduct, which will eventually simplify the procedure. Your main focus here should be on the matter of simplification of procedure to bring the convicted person under instant scrutiny. On the verge of this, you can touch this RPA Act or corrupt practices. But rather doing this, if you fully focus on writing the features of RPA Act or the provisions of corrupt practices, then obviously you will be away from the ground reality of the question, who is the interface of this question demands. So at the end, what I can suggest to you is that while writing answers in GS2 in polity, you have to take note of some factors which are like this: conscious reading of words. Conscious reading of words. That means you have to read the words in the question very carefully. Not only this, you have to carefully use words. You have to carefully use words while writing answers, because the replacement of a single word by another word can change the whole meaning of the answer. In that way, whole meaning of the question. So conscious reading of the words in the question and conscious application of words in writing answers is equally important in polity. I am giving you an example. Section 8A of the RPA Act provides for disqualification of candidates on the ground of corrupt practices. And Section 123 talks about the corrupt practices and listed in detail. In first reading, both the points seems to be same, but actually it is not. While one part says about the disqualification of candidates on a particular ground, thus another provision narrates that particular ground in detail. Right, so replacement of one with another will change the meaning of the question as well as will change the meaning of the answer. Another thing is need to discover the link between theory and dynamic part in the question, which we have already observed. The necessary interface between theory and dynamic part. You have to calculate the interface. You have to find out the interface which is the required demand of the question given by the theoretical and dynamic part of the question. And another thing is that your analytical capability to judge the situation under the right of given political circumstances. Your analytical capability to judge the situation under the right of the given political circumstances. Here you have to apply your analytical power under given socio-political situation. Right. So these are some tricks which I think will obviously help you to understand question and as well as writing answers in polity section from GS2. Hope you will continue your study well. I will come again with another video. Till then, take care and bye bye.